True that Squercum himself had seen the letter in Mr. Bideawhile's office, which conveyed to the father's lawyer the son's sanction for the surrender of the title deeds, and that that letter, prepared in Mr. Bideawhile's office, purported to have Dolly's signature. Squercum said but little, remembering that his client was not always clear in the morning as to anything he had done on the preceding evening. But the signature, though it was scrawled as Dolly always scrawled it, was not like the scrawl of a drunken man. The letter was said to have been sent to Mr. Bideawhile's office with other letters and papers, direct from old Mr. Longestaffe. Such was the statement made at first to Mr. Squercum by the Bideawhile party, who at that moment had no doubt of the genuineness of the letter or of the accuracy of their statement. Then Squercum saw his client again, and returned to the charge at Bideawhile's office with the positive assurance that the signature was a forgery. Dolly, when questioned by Squercum, quite admitted his propensity to be tight. He had no reticence, no feeling of disgrace on such matters. But he had signed no letter when he was tight. "Never did such a thing in my life, and nothing could make me," said Dolly. "I'm never tight except at the club, and the letter couldn't have been there. I'll be drawn and quartered if I ever signed it. That's flat." Dolly was intent on going to his father at once, on going to Melmotte at once, on going to Bideawhile's at once, and making there no end of a row. But Squercum stopped him. "We'll just ferret this thing out quietly," said Squercum, who perhaps thought that there would be high honour in discovering the peccadilloes of so great a man as Mr. Melmotte. Mr. Longestaffe, the father, had heard nothing of the matter till the Saturday after his last interview with Melmotte in the city. He had then called at Bideawhile's office in Lincoln's Inn Fields, and had been shown the letter. He declared at once that he had never sent the letter to Mr. Bideawhile. He had begged his son to sign the letter, and his son had refused. He did not at that moment distinctly remember what he had done with the letter unsigned. He believed that he had left it with the other papers, but it was possible that his son might have taken it away. He acknowledged that at the time he had been both angry and unhappy. He didn't think that he could have sent the letter back unsigned, but he was not sure. He had more than once been in his own study in Bruton Street, since Mr. Melmotte had occupied the house, by that gentleman's leave, having left various papers there under his own lock and key. Indeed, it had been matter of agreement that he should have access to his own study when he let the house. He thought it probable that he would have kept back the unsigned letter, and have kept it under lock and key when he sent away the other papers. Then reference was made to Mr. Longestaffe's own letter to the lawyer, and it was found that he had not even alluded to that which his son had been asked to sign, but that he had said, in his own usually pompous style, that Mr. Longestaffe junior was still prone to create unsubstantial difficulties. Mr. Bideawhile was obliged to confess that there had been a want of caution among his own people. This allusion to the creation of difficulties by Dolly, accompanied as it was supposed to have been by Dolly's letter doing away with all difficulties, should have attracted notice. Dolly's letter must have come in a separate envelope, but such envelope could not be found, and the circumstance was not remembered by the clerk. The clerk who had prepared the letter for Dolly's signature represented himself as having been quite satisfied when the letter came again beneath his notice with Dolly's well-known signature. Such were the facts as far as they were known at Messrs. Slow and Bideawhile's office, from whom no slightest rumour emanated, and as they had been in part collected by Squercum, who was probably less prudent. The Bideawhiles were still perfectly sure that Dolly had signed the letter, believing the young man to be quite incapable of knowing on any day what he had done on the day before. Squercum was quite sure that his client had not signed it, and it must be owned on Dolly's behalf that his manner on this occasion was qualified to convince. "Yes," he said to Squercum, "it's easy saying that I'm lackadaisical, but I know when I'm lackadaisical and when I'm not. Awake or asleep, drunk or sober, I never signed that letter." And Mr. Squercum believed him. It would be hard to say how the rumour first got into the city on this Monday morning. Though the elder Longestaffe had first heard of the matter only on the previous Saturday, Mr. Squercum had been at work for above a week. Mr. Squercum's little matter alone might hardly have attracted the attention which certainly was given on this day to Mr. Melmotte's private affairs, but other facts coming to light assisted Squercum's views. A great many shares of the South Central Pacific and Mexican Railway had been thrown upon the market, all of which had passed through the hands of Mr. Cohenlupe. And Mr. Cohenlupe in the City had been all to Mr. Melmotte as Lord Alfred had been at the West End. Then there was the mortgage of this Pickering property, for which the money certainly had not been paid, and there was the traffic with half a street of houses near the Commercial Road, by which a large sum of money had come into Mr. Melmotte's hands. It might, no doubt, all be right. There were many who thought that it would all be right. There were not a few who expressed the most thorough contempt for these rumours. But it was felt to be a pity that Mr. Melmotte was not in the City. This was the day of the dinner. The Lord Mayor had even made up his mind that he would not go to the dinner. What one of his brother aldermen said to him about leaving others in the lurch might be quite true; but, as his lordship remarked, Melmotte was a commercial man, and as these were commercial transactions, it behoved the Lord Mayor of London to be more careful than other men. He had always had his doubts, and he would not go. Others of the chosen few of the City, who had been honoured with commands to meet the Emperor, resolved upon absenting themselves unless the Lord Mayor went. The affair was very much discussed, and there were no less than 6 declared City defaulters. At the last moment a 7th was taken ill, and sent a note to Miles Grendall excusing himself, which was thrust into the Secretary's hands just as the Emperor arrived. But a reverse worse than this took place. A defalcation more injurious to the Melmotte interests generally even than that which was caused either by the prudence or by the cowardice of the City magnates. The House of Commons at its meeting had heard the tidings in an exaggerated form. It was whispered about that Melmotte had been detected in forging the deed of conveyance of a large property, and that he had already been visited by policemen. By some it was believed that the great financier would lie in the hands of the Philistines while the Emperor of China was being fed at his house. In the 3rd edition of the Evening Pulpit came out a mysterious paragraph, which nobody could understand but they who had known all about it before. A rumour is prevalent that frauds to an enormous extent have been committed by a gentleman whose name we are particularly unwilling to mention. If it be so, it is indeed remarkable that they should have come to light at the present moment. We cannot trust ourselves to say more than this. No one wishes to dine with a swindler. No one likes even to have dined with a swindler, especially to have dined with him at a time when his swindling was known or suspected. The Emperor of China no doubt was going to dine with this man. The motions of emperors are managed with such ponderous care that it was held to be impossible now to save the country from what would doubtless be felt to be a disgrace if it should hereafter turn out that a forger had been solicited to entertain the imperial guest of the country. Nor was the thing as yet so far certain as to justify such a charge, were it possible. But many men were unhappy in their minds. How would the story be told hereafter if Melmotte should be allowed to play out his game of host to the Emperor, and be arrested for forgery as soon as the Eastern monarch should have left his house? How would the brother of the son like the remembrance of the banquet which he had been instructed to honour with his presence? How would it tell in all the foreign newspapers, in New York, in Paris, and Vienna, that this man, who had been cast forth from the United States, from France, and from Austria, had been selected as the great and honourable type of British commerce? There were those in the House who thought that the absolute consummation of the disgrace might yet be avoided, and who were of opinion that the dinner should be postponed. The Leader of the Opposition had a few words on the subject with the Prime Minister. "It is the merest rumour," said the Prime Minister. "I have inquired, and there is nothing to justify me in thinking that the charges can be substantiated." "They say that the story is believed in the City." "I should not feel myself justified in acting upon such a report. The Prince might probably find it impossible not to go. Where should we be if Mr. Melmotte to morrow were able to prove the whole to be a calumny, and to show that the thing had been got up with a view of influencing the election at Westminster? The dinner must certainly go on." "And you will go yourself?" "Most assuredly," said the Prime Minister, "and I hope that you will keep me in countenance." His political antagonist declared with a smile that at such a crisis